It's Sunday morning with Mark Sainsbury.
Time to look at the workplace and issues around that, of course, with Dr. Harold Hillman. He's a managing director, leadership coach, author, celebrity speaker, very busy boy is Harold, but he takes time out on a Sunday morning to talk to us here on Radio Live. And Harold, you're going to explain something, look, that sometimes we're a bit embarrassed, I think, to actually ask. Gen X, Gen Y, and baby boomers.
That's right, Mark.
Define them for us, can you?
Will do. I'm wanting to talk to you today about some research from a study by Ernst & Young in 2013, where they took a look at 1,200 professionals across generations and industries, largely U.S.-based, but we can definitely extrapolate to New Zealand. Generation Y are what we call the millennials, and those are folks who are between the ages of 18 and 32. And as you might expect, these are people who bring a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm. They're young folks, and so they come with optimism and a can-do mentality. They're technologically quite savvy. They're connected to the world immediately. And they also, because of just their generation, they tend to value diversity. They've worked more and communicate more with people who are different from them. The downside of the Generation Y is that they tend not to be what we call traditional team players, and they also don't necessarily commit themselves in terms of loyalty. And then there's that Generation X, Mark, and those are people between 33 and 48, so what we might call the middle-agers, if you will. And these are folks who, in terms of what they bring, the positives, they're the real revenue generators in companies. They tend to be more collaborative and more adaptive problem solvers. On the downside, they aren't as young as Generation Y, so they aren't as savvy in terms of social media. And they tend to really think in terms of sort of traditional boundaries. And then finally, Mark, there's us. They're the baby boomers between the ages of 49 and 67. And the baby boomers really, they tend to bring the hardest working ethic to the table. There's a real strong ethic, a premium on relationships in the way that you and I used to think about them. They tend to be better team players. But the downside of baby boomers in today's work environment is that they sometimes can not be as change adaptive. They can become irrelevant and sometimes defend the status quo.
Oh, I'm feeling depressed.
Yeah. So, but can you imagine, Mark, then roughly 20% of managers today manage teams that have an equal mix of people across these three generational, divides there, and it's a real challenge. Roughly 70% of managers in the study suggested that it was their top concern as a manager. How in the world do I manage people who walk through the door each day with a different template in their head around what they're expecting?
So if you are a manager, and we look at the pros and cons of each sort of group, how do you juggle it?
Yeah, some companies are getting quite progressive about this. I was visiting an HR director of a pretty large company in New Zealand this morning, and they've actually incorporated it into their management training now. And so that sense of how do you leverage the best strengths of each one of these generations and get people to the point where they feel that they're contributing equally. It's a task and it's a challenge that managers, let's say 20, 25 years ago, just didn't have to face.
Tell me, Harold, do the managers, are they mainly in the baby boomer?
Wow, that's interesting, Mark. Over the last 5 years, there's been an incredible shift from fewer managers, obviously, in the baby boomer generation as those people prepare for retirement. But there are a lot of younger managers now from that Generation Y category that are being promoted into responsibility, where for the first time we have a significant number of younger people managing older people.
So the millennials, the Y generation, are leapfrogging the X generation.
That's right. They're interesting in terms of perks and why people stay with companies. Generation Y, the youngest generation, 18 to 32, they're more focused on promotions and status. I think they've come up in that era of likes and hits and, those types of things. And so they are putting their hands up more aggressively for these management roles that then put them, the youngest in the crowd, in charge of the oldest in the crowd.
What is wrong with Generation X, Harold?
Generation X is in the middle, and you might just call that the middle child syndrome. and that sense that they have to work harder to stand out. Now, Generation X really does have its foot on the accelerator around revenue generators. They are the ones who are sitting in the key roles right now, so we can't rule Generation X out. But they have to work hard to keep themselves relevant, certainly with Generation Y.
Who is going to, I mean, if we look at the ambition, if you like, from Generation Y, and they want the promotions, they're keen on moving up.
That's right.
What motivates Generation X?
Generation X. Generation X is, they're more motivated by flexibility. Now, the study also took a look at what, once people join organizations, what keeps them there. For Generation X and Y, there's a greater premium on workplace flexibility. So I'm more likely to be content and more likely to stay if I feel that the organization is adjusting around my sort of my work-life needs. We talked about that in an earlier show.
So me.
That's right. So Generation X and Generation Y, they're more similar, whereas the baby boomers prefer more of a traditional structure and schedule around how things flow. There's more flexibility associated with the two younger generations.
Well, they haven't got rid of us yet, and nor are they going to, Harold.
That's right.
Dr. Harold Hillman, thank you once again for joining us here on Sunday mornings on Radio Live. And you can always check out Harold on www.sigmoidcurve.com. We'll talk to you next week, Harold.
All right. Take care, Mark.